The city was alive with restless energy, neon lights flickering against rain-slicked streets as Ethan's heart raced in his chest. He told himself it was harmless, just a small exaggeration, just one slip. His voice trembled as he thought, "No one will ever know." Yet the silence in his office felt heavier than the storm outside, as though the walls themselves whispered back lies he had not yet spoken. Every tick of the clock pressed against him, daring him to make a choice. The temptation gnawed. This could solve his bills, quiet his doubts, and give him a taste of the life he felt denied. But beneath the surge of excitement, dread coiled in his stomach. He saw the reflection of his weary face in the dark glass window, asking if this was the first step toward ruin. His phone buzzed with a reminder breaking the tension, and he leaned back, rehearsing excuses. The world would see confidence, yet inside was the sound of breaking glass. He muttered to himself, "This is just the beginning," unaware of how much truth hid in those words. Morning arrived, yet the weight of last night's decision lingered. Ethan forced a smile as he walked through the crowded office lobby, his suit freshly pressed but his nerves raw. He whispered excuses in his head, preparing for anyone who might question him. The voices around him felt muffled, distant, like a storm waiting behind a thin wall. He told himself it was progress, that this was how winners played the game. But his stomach twisted with each step toward his desk. He glanced at coworkers laughing, the sound digging into him, as though mocking the mask he wore. The hum of computers greeted him, a reminder of the fabricated entry he had submitted hours before. His phone buzzed again, this time with praise, and though his lips curled upward, his chest ached. A voice inside whispered, "This is not who you are," but he drowned it with forced confidence. The day had just begun, but the lie had already taken root, a seed pushing into soil it could not leave. At his desk, Ethan buried himself in work, pretending each keystroke was natural, though his mind replayed the lie. His boss walked past with a nod, and Ethan's chest tightened as though approval had been stolen. He reminded himself this was survival, not betrayal. His hands trembled but his posture remained confident. Emails stacked up, praise for numbers he hadn't earned, each one a spark feeding the fire inside. His heart beat faster with every notification, adrenaline masking the unease. He told himself to breathe, to accept the victory, but each word read aloud in his head sounded hollow. He forced a grin when a colleague stopped to chat, masking the fear that truth might surface. As the day stretched, guilt shadowed every corner of his vision, whispering questions he refused to answer. He kept repeating, "Just one time," though the echo suggested otherwise. Lunch hour arrived, and Ethan sat alone, his tray untouched. The cafeteria buzzed with chatter, but his mind lingered on numbers he knew weren't real. He imagined his mentor's words about integrity, echoing faintly, a warning he had ignored. He told himself he would fix it soon, but excuses blurred into promises he didn't mean. The fork in his hand tapped nervously against the plate, as though begging him to stop lying. He scanned the room, watching groups laugh together while he remained an island, drowning in silence. A coworker waved, but he pretended not to notice. Guilt tasted bitter in his throat, yet ambition whispered sweetly, offering escape from debt and insignificance. He clenched his fist, whispering inside, "This is temporary," though fear told him otherwise. Evening fell, the office quieting as coworkers left. Ethan remained, staring at the glowing screen that seemed to judge him. The lie had worked for now, but the weight of it pressed harder than expected. He told himself to celebrate, but instead he sat motionless, haunted by doubt. Outside, the city skyline burned orange under the setting sun, a reminder of dreams he had chased too desperately. He whispered silently, "It's just a step," though each word cracked with fear. His reflection in the glass showed a man split in two, ambition burning on one side, regret on the other. He closed the laptop, yet the sound echoed like a door slamming shut on innocence. He knew there was no turning back, the path had begun. The week began with a strange thrill in Ethan's chest. His fabricated numbers had not only gone unnoticed, but they had been praised. His boss clapped him on the back and said, "Impressive work," words that made his heart race. He wanted to feel proud, but the pride felt hollow, built on shadows. The lie no longer seemed dangerous. It felt like a door opening to possibilities he had never imagined. He caught his reflection in the polished conference table, the face of someone who didn't fully believe in the man staring back. Still, his lips curved upward, convincing himself this was a necessary path. Every compliment, every approving nod, poured gasoline on a growing fire inside him. Yet beneath the surface, a low hum of guilt reminded him that lies were seeds, and seeds always grew. He ignored the whisper, holding tighter to the applause, desperate to believe he had finally stepped into the light he deserved. That evening, Ethan returned home with a small spark of joy he hadn't felt in years. He placed an expensive bottle of wine on the kitchen counter, a luxury he shouldn't have afforded. He told himself it was harmless, a small reward for progress. His apartment glowed with warm lamps, but the silence echoed louder than comfort should. He poured himself a glass and lifted it in a mock toast, whispering, "To the new me." The liquid burned his throat, but the taste felt like victory. Still, as he sat by the window, staring at the city lights, shadows crept across his expression. Each light outside reminded him of thousands of stories built on truth, while his was already tilting under lies. Yet ambition whispered that he was smarter, sharper, destined for more. The wine dulled the fear, leaving behind only the sweet taste of imagined success. He believed, if only for a moment, that the risk was worth it. The next morning, Ethan arrived early, clutching a folder filled with reports. His lie had set a standard, and now he needed to keep up with it. He rehearsed his explanations in the elevator, each excuse sharper than the last. As the doors opened, he stepped into the office with a newfound swagger, masking the dread buried inside. Colleagues nodded with respect, unaware of the cracks in his armor. He sat at his desk, forcing numbers into patterns that weren't real, his fingers flying across the keyboard, as though speed alone could justify falsehood. Sweat dotted his brow, yet the compliments fueled him, each message of approval digging him deeper. He felt like an actor in a role that grew harder each day. Applause louder, lies heavier. Still, he pushed forward, telling himself this was the price of ambition. The voice of doubt grew quieter under the weight of rising expectation. Later that day, Ethan's mentor, Daniel, approached with calm eyes that seemed to pierce through masks. He asked simple questions, but each word felt like a blade pressing against Ethan's fragile facade. "You've been doing well," Daniel said, his tone steady. "But remember, shortcuts often lead to cliffs." Ethan smiled, hiding his unease, responding with casual confidence. But inside, the words lingered like an echo in an empty hall. He wanted to dismiss them, yet something in Daniel's gaze unsettled him. It was not accusation, but warning. Ethan nodded politely, yet his stomach churned. He convinced himself Daniel didn't understand, that he was old-fashioned, blind to the new ways of survival. Still, the voice of caution dug deeper, forcing him to confront the possibility that he was already standing on the edge. He walked away with a steady step, but his heart stumbled under the weight of unspoken truth. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying Daniel's words in his head. The praise from his boss echoed alongside the warning, clashing like two voices fighting for control. His heart thudded in restless rhythm, torn between ambition and fear. He turned onto his side, the glow of the city filtering through blinds painting stripes across his face. "I'm fine," he whispered to the silence, though his tone betrayed him. He thought of the bills stacked on his desk, the dreams he had carried since youth, and the gnawing sense that he was becoming someone he no longer recognized. Shadows danced across the walls, mocking him with shapes of doubt. He closed his eyes, gripping the sheets as though they could anchor him. Tomorrow, he told himself, he would be stronger. But deep down, he already knew tomorrow would only bring deeper lies. The office grew quieter as the day stretched, Yet Ethan's mind thundered louder than ever. He stared at the glowing monitor, but the numbers swam before his eyes. A voice, sharp and familiar, whispered in his head, "You're not good enough. You've never been." He shook his head, pretending focus, but the whispers followed like shadows at noon. Each compliment from colleagues now felt twisted, transformed into accusations. His heart raced as he imagined them uncovering the truth, laughter breaking through the walls. He gripped the edge of his desk, nails digging into the wood. He muttered softly, "It's fine, I've got this." But the voice hissed back, "No, you don't." He leaned back in his chair, the ceiling lights glaring down like interrogation lamps. In that moment it wasn't his boss or mentor standing against him, it was himself. His reflection on the screen no longer looked like a man climbing forward, but one crumbling under the weight of deceit. Later in the restroom, Ethan splashed water on his face, gripping the porcelain sink as though it could anchor him. He stared into the mirror, his eyes bloodshot, his smile forced. "You're fine," he whispered. But the mirror said otherwise. The voice returned, crueler now, "Look at you, a fraud pretending to be a man." His chest tightened, as if invisible hands squeezed his lungs. He slammed his fist lightly on the sink, trying to drown the echo, but the words clung to him. Every drop of water dripping from the faucet seemed to count down a timer he couldn't stop. He leaned closer to the glass, forehead resting against it, sweat mixing with water. The silence of the room made the whispers louder, impossible to ignore. He left with a straightened posture, but the hollow echo of failure followed him back into the hall like a shadow he couldn't escape. That afternoon, a colleague approached with a smile, congratulating Ethan on his remarkable results. Their words struck like daggers wrapped in velvet. He nodded politely, forcing a grin, but inside the critics sneered, if only they knew. He struggled to focus on the conversation, nodding in rhythm while sweat prickled down his neck. Every laugh felt sharper, every word exaggerated in his mind, until it sounded like mockery. He excused himself quickly, mumbling about work. Back at his desk, his fingers hovered above the keyboard, trembling. The email inbox bloomed with more praise, each one feeding the lie he could no longer control. His mind replayed the critic's voice, now louder than ever, "You're not succeeding. You're surviving on borrowed time." His smile cracked as his thoughts spiraled, yet he pressed forward, building more lies to cover the ones already growing. His mask felt heavier with every passing moment. That evening, Ethan walked home through the crowded streets. The city buzzed with life, but every voice and sound around him blurred into a single question. Who are you becoming? He tugged his coat tighter against the chill, though the cold was nothing compared to the frost growing inside his chest. Passing shop windows, he glimpsed his reflection again and again, each one distorted by glass, neon, and rain. In every reflection, the critic stared back with a smirk. His pace quickened, yet the voice followed, laughing, reminding him of debts, lies, and the fragile world he built. He tried to drown it in the rhythm of footsteps, in the noise of traffic, but it clawed louder. He whispered under his breath, "Stop," but it didn't stop. The night air pressed down on him, heavy and suffocating, and for the first time he realized the critic wasn't going away. It was him. At home, Ethan sat in silence, the city lights flickering through the blinds. The critic's words replayed endlessly, filling the room with noise only he could hear. He tried turning on the television, but the voices on screen felt like more accusations. He poured himself another drink, his hand shaking as liquid spilled onto the counter. "You'll never escape," the voice whispered, threading through the silence. His chest heaved with uneven breaths as he clutched the glass tighter. He glanced at old photos on the shelf, images of a younger version of himself, full of hope. The critic mocked that boy too, sneering at dreams long abandoned. Ethan lowered his head into his hands, whispering, "I just wanted more." The words cracked with despair. Outside, sirens wailed, echoing through the night, blending with his thoughts. He felt trapped, not by the city, but by the storm inside. Ethan sat in the conference room, surrounded by charts he had carefully fabricated. Colleagues leaned in, impressed by the story his numbers told. His pulse pounded as he spoke, words flowing too easily, rehearsed like a performance. Applause followed, and his boss praised him once again. But beneath the table, Ethan's hands clenched tightly, knuckles white, as though holding the lie together with brute force. He smiled broadly, but inside he felt like a man building a tower on sand. Every nod of approval added another block to a structure destined to collapse. He thought of Daniel's warning, but pushed it aside, drowning in the intoxication of validation. Yet the critic whispered louder, "You're not presenting success, you're presenting fiction." He swallowed hard, forcing his voice steady, praying no one noticed the cracks forming in his calm. The meeting ended in triumph, but as he gathered his papers, guilt clung to him like smoke. That afternoon, Ethan sat at his desk, an email blinking with praise. A coworker leaned over, asking him for advice, eyes wide with admiration. He chuckled nervously, offering quick tips, though inside he felt like a thief teaching others how to steal. The weight of expectation pressed on him. He realized every lie he told demanded another to keep it alive. The critic's voice purred, "You can't stop now, you'll be exposed." He adjusted his tie, forcing his tone calm, while sweat dampened his collar. The coworker walked away, smiling, but Ethan's chest grew heavy with dread. He imagined the moment when someone would notice the inconsistencies, and panic stabbed at him. Still, he told himself he was too far in to stop. Each word he spoke chained him tighter to a life he didn't recognize. Yet he couldn't resist the power it gave him, if only for a moment. Later in the break room, Ethan overheard two colleagues chatting. Their laughter turned sharp in his ears, twisting into whispers about him. He knew they weren't speaking of his lies, but paranoia clamped onto every sound. He gripped his coffee mug tighter, pretending indifference, though his jaw tensed with unease. The critic murmured, "They're catching on. They see through you." He avoided their gaze, staring instead at the vending machine, heart thumping wildly. A simple laugh from others now felt like mockery. He sipped bitter coffee, burning his tongue, but welcomed the sting. It grounded him in reality for a fleeting second. He forced himself to walk away, shoulders straight, but every step felt heavier. Behind him, the sound of their laughter continued, stabbing deeper into his already fractured mind. By the time he returned to his desk, paranoia had wrapped itself tightly around him, choking every thought. That night, at home, Ethan sat with Claire, his girlfriend, who noticed his distance. She asked softly, "Is something wrong?" He forced a smile, answering quickly, "Just tired from work." But she watched him closely, suspicion flickering in her eyes. He avoided her gaze, staring at the television, though the screen was nothing but colors moving aimlessly. The critic whispered, "She knows. She'll leave when she sees who you are." Ethan swallowed hard, pretending interest in the program, his body stiff. Claire reached for his hand, but he pulled away subtly, fearing she would feel the tremor in his fingers. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. She turned back to the screen, frowning faintly. Ethan felt his chest tighten, realizing his lies were no longer just his own. They were poisoning the trust of those closest to him. Yet even then he lacked the courage to confess. As midnight approached, Ethan stared at his laptop, creating another false report. The numbers flowed easier now, his fingers no longer trembling but steady with practiced deceit. Yet with every keystroke, the critic's laughter grew louder. He leaned back exhausted, sweat clinging to his temples. The apartment was silent, except for the sound of his typing, which echoed like hammers nailing shut a coffin. He paused, staring at the glowing screen, realizing he was no longer simply lying, he was building a life out of them. He muttered to himself, "Just one more, then I'll stop." But he knew it was a lie too. His reflection in the screen showed a man he didn't recognize, eyes dark with fatigue and fear. He closed the report sighing, yet the guilt didn't leave. Instead, it deepened, a shadow that promised to follow him into every tomorrow. Morning sunlight streamed into the office, but to Ethan it felt like a harsh spotlight. An email notification appeared on his screen, its subject line simple yet terrifying: discrepancies found. His chest tightened, breath caught in his throat. He clicked, hands trembling, reading the words that questioned the accuracy of his reports. A wave of dread crashed through him, shattering the fragile confidence he carried. He leaned back, staring blankly at the ceiling, hearing the critic's voice sneer, "It's over." His palms grew clammy as colleagues walked past, unaware of the storm inside him. He whispered under his breath, "Stay calm, fix it." But deep down, he knew the cracks were no longer invisible. The lie had grown too large to remain hidden. For the first time he saw the possibility of losing everything, not later, but now. The silence around him felt suffocating, as though the office itself waited for his collapse. Hours later, Ethan sat in a small glass-walled meeting room across from Daniel. Papers lay scattered between them, filled with highlighted figures. Daniel's calm voice carried weight. "These numbers don't align, Ethan. What happened?" Ethan's throat felt dry, his rehearsed excuses vanishing under Daniel's steady gaze. He muttered something about oversight, but the words sounded weak even to him. Daniel leaned forward, eyes firm yet not unkind. "You're better than shortcuts," he said quietly. Ethan felt a lump in his chest, shame pressing down heavier than any burden before. He wanted to confess, to spill everything, but fear held his tongue. The critic whispered, "Lie again. It's all you know." He forced a nod, pretending confidence, though guilt screamed within him. Leaving the room, he realized the mentor's words weren't just advice. They were a mirror showing the man he refused to admit he had become. That evening, Ethan returned home, drained, collapsing into his chair. Claire confronted him, her voice quiet but edged with worry. "You've been different. What's going on?" He forced a laugh, waving off her concern, but his tone cracked under pressure. She frowned, searching his face for truth, and the silence between them grew heavy. The critic hissed, "She sees right through you." His chest ached as he tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. Claire touched his arm gently, but he recoiled, ashamed of the lies building between them. "It's just stress," he muttered, eyes fixed on the floor. Yet her gaze told him she didn't believe it. The tension fractured the warmth once alive in their home, leaving behind a hollow echo of what love used to feel like. Ethan realized his deception had already poisoned the most sacred part of his life. The following day, Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the screen without moving. His inbox overflowed with questions, managers asking for clarifications. Each word burned into him like a brand. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, frozen between truth and another lie. Sweat rolled down his temple as the critic's laughter grew deafening. "This is the end," it taunted, "unless you lie again." He shut his eyes, whispering to himself, "One more, just one more." His heart pounded like a drum, blood roaring in his ears. He typed quickly, fabricating answers, constructing another layer of deceit. Yet even as he wrote, he knew this was no escape. It was a prison. When he pressed send, his chest collapsed with exhaustion. The office hummed with normalcy, but for Ethan, each sound was muted, drowned by the truth he continued to bury deeper with trembling hands. That night, unable to bear the silence of his apartment, Ethan wandered the streets aimlessly. Neon lights flickered above him, rain drizzling onto the pavement. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets, walking faster as though he could outrun the voice inside. The critic's whispers followed with every step. "You've built your life on lies. It will bury you." His reflection appeared in every wet surface, twisted and fractured by the rain. He stopped beneath a flickering street lamp, staring at himself in a puddle, the water rippling with every drop. For the first time he admitted the truth silently. He no longer knew who he was. His shoulders sagged as he whispered, "I just wanted to be enough." The words disappeared into the night, swallowed by the city's endless hum. He realized then that no applause could silence the storm inside him, and the reckoning was only beginning. The office buzzed with nervous energy as Ethan was summoned to the boardroom. A stack of reports lay waiting on the polished table, marked with red ink highlighting every inconsistency. His boss's voice was stern, demanding explanations. Ethan forced his breathing steady, words rehearsed in his head collapsing under the weight of scrutiny. His chest tightened, every gaze in the room piercing through his fragile armor. "It's all a mistake," he blurted, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Silence followed, thick and unyielding. Critic whispered louder than ever, "They see you. You're finished." Ethan's palms sweated, his tie choking him like a noose. He wanted to scream the truth, but fear of ruin chained his tongue. His colleagues' faces blurred, judgment filling the air. For the first time, applause had turned into suspicion, and Ethan felt the walls of his carefully built empire closing in. After the meeting, Ethan stumbled into the restroom, gripping the sink for balance. His reflection stared back with hollow eyes, skin pale, shirt clinging with sweat. He whispered, "I can't do this anymore." The critic sneered from inside, "This is who you are. A fraud." Tears pricked his eyes, blurring the image in the mirror. His breathing quickened, uneven gasps echoing in the tiled room. He slammed his fist against the counter, but the pain didn't silence the voice. Memories of Daniel's warning flashed, his mentor's calm voice drowned by the roar of self-loathing. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass, desperate for relief, but found none. The room seemed to spin as his world unraveled. For the first time he realized his enemy wasn't the world outside. It was the voice within, a shadow that had grown louder with every lie. That evening, Claire confronted Ethan directly. Her eyes burned with hurt as she asked, "What are you hiding from me?" He froze, silence dragging heavy between them. Critic hissed, "Lie. It's all you can do." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Claire's voice trembled as she pressed on, "I don't even recognize you anymore." Shame gripped him, stronger than fear, yet his tongue refused to confess. He turned away, shoulders sagging under the weight of secrets. Claire's tears fell, her voice breaking. "If you can't be honest, then what are we?" His heart cracked at her words, yet he couldn't bring himself to answer. The critic mocked, "You'll lose her too." The silence that followed was louder than any argument, a final wall between them. Ethan realized his lies hadn't just stolen numbers, they were stealing the love that once gave his life meaning. Alone again, Ethan sat at his desk, laptop open, numbers glowing across the screen. The critic's laughter filled the silence, louder than the hum of the machine. He typed another report, fingers moving automatically, though his mind screamed for him to stop. He slammed the laptop shut, chest heaving as if he had just run a race. The room felt too small, the walls closing in. He whispered, "No more," but the urge to cover, to fabricate, clawed at him. His reflection in the black screen smirked back, the critic's face overlapping his own. He shouted, "Leave me alone." His voice cracked, echoing in the empty apartment. The silence afterward pressed heavy on him, broken only by his ragged breathing. In that moment, Ethan realized he wasn't fighting coworkers or expectations, he was fighting himself. And losing. Late at night, Ethan stood on his balcony, staring at the city lights below. The cold wind whipped against his face, carrying the distant hum of traffic. He gripped the railing, chest heaving, as the critic whispered relentlessly, "It's all gone. You're nothing." His eyes burned with unshed tears, the weight of every lie pressing down like chains. For a fleeting moment, he imagined letting go, the fall silencing the storm forever. But then, Daniel's voice echoed in memory, calm and steady, "You are better than shortcuts." Ethan's grip tightened, knuckles white, refusing to release. He whispered to himself, "Not yet. Not like this." The city below shimmered, alive with possibilities he no longer believed belonged to him. Yet in that moment, a fragile spark remained. He stepped back, trembling, knowing he had reached the breaking point. Tomorrow, he would either rebuild or fall completely. Morning light spilled into Ethan's apartment, but it did not bring peace. He sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands, surrounded by unpaid bills and empty glasses. His phone buzzed endlessly, each notification a reminder of the walls closing in. He whispered, "I can't keep running." The critic chuckled, "You're too weak to change." He clenched his fists, breathing unevenly, trying to silence the voice. Daniel's words replayed in his head, echoing like distant thunder. Shortcuts lead to cliffs. He looked at the papers scattered before him, a record of every lie he'd told, and felt the crushing weight of truth. His chest ached as he realized this wasn't just about work. It was about the life he'd built on deceit. His reflection in the black screen of his phone stared back at him, hollow and tired. For the first time he admitted aloud, "I've become the very thing I feared." At the office, Ethan stood outside Daniel's door, heart pounding. His hand hovered over the handle, the critic whispering, "Turn back. It's too late." He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, and stepped inside. Daniel looked up, surprised but calm, waiting. Ethan's voice trembled. "I've lied. I've faked everything." The confession spilled like poison finally released, his words cracking as tears welled. Silence hung heavy in the room, but Daniel did not interrupt. He simply listened, steady as stone. Ethan's chest heaved as he finished, unable to meet his mentor's gaze. "I wanted to be enough," he whispered, barely audible. Daniel leaned forward, voice low but firm. "The truth is painful, but it's the only way forward." Ethan nodded slowly, his shoulders trembling. But for the first time in months, the storm inside him softened, replaced by a fragile sense of release. That evening, Ethan returned home to Claire. She looked at him with weary eyes, expecting another excuse. Instead, he sat across from her and whispered, "I've been lying." Her breath caught, silence stretching between them. He confessed everything, the words tumbling with shame, yet each one freeing him. Claire's face shifted from shock to sorrow, then to something softer. Tears welled in her eyes, but she reached across the table, taking his trembling hands. "I just wanted the truth," she said quietly. Relief and pain collided in his chest, leaving him shaking. He knew forgiveness wouldn't come easily, but for the first time, honesty bridged the gulf between them. The critic's voice faltered, weaker now, drowned out by the weight of truth. Ethan exhaled, feeling both shattered and whole, realizing love could survive if rooted not in lies, but in fragile honesty. Days later, Ethan walked through the office, no longer greeted with applause, but with silence. He had confessed to his bosses, and though anger and disappointment followed, there was also space for rebuilding. Stripped of his false pedestal, he felt strangely lighter. The critic whispered faintly, but the voice no longer held the same power. Daniel passed by, offering a small nod, a reminder that truth was its own strength. Ethan's steps were slower, more deliberate, no longer fueled by the frantic energy of deceit. He sat at his desk, the work before him real, unembellished, fragile but true. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to pretend. The weight of shame remained, but beneath it lay a seed of hope. He whispered to himself, "This is where I start again," knowing the path ahead would be steep. But at last it was honest. Late at night, Ethan stood once again on his balcony, the city glowing beneath him. This time, the wind carried not despair, but quiet resolve. He gripped the railing, remembering the night he almost let go, and whispered, "I choose to fight." The critic's voice tried to return, faint and mocking, but Ethan shook his head. "You don't own me anymore." His reflection in the window behind him showed a man still broken, but no longer hiding. The weight of lies had nearly destroyed him, but in their ruin he found a fragile truth. He turned back inside, closing the door, leaving the storm outside. The city continued its hum, indifferent, but Ethan no longer needed its applause. For the first time, he felt the smallest spark of peace. The screen faded to black as his final words echoed softly. "The cost of greed is everything, but honesty gives you back yourself."